Now we want to talk about creating IKs. And then in the future, we're going to talk about how to implement this on our rig. So I'm going to create a very basic 2-joint system here. 1, 2. There we go. And now I'm going to create another joint system of just 3 joints. 1, 2, 3. Just a little pyramid. Okay. So how do I create IKs? Well, I create IKs pretty easily by going up to skeleton, and I have my IK handle tool. Okay, so by default, you're going to have 2 what are called current solvers. Single chain and rotate plane. Now, how do you really differentiate which one you need? I mean, it says single chain. Hey, I got a single chain here. Yeah. A best way to announce this is that single chain solvers do not solve for an elbow, where rotate plane does solve for an elbow. So if you need to actually have a knee or an elbow, you're going to do a rotate plane. Otherwise, you can do single chains. And just because it's 2 joints doesn't mean you can't use a single chain if it's more than 2 joints. You can use it for many different things. Okay, so how do I create an IK? Well, I go into my mode, the solver I want. In this case, we're going to do a single chain. And you can see I get this little reticle. I click my first joint, and then I click my last joint, and I get my IK. Again, I get these weird values and a rotation on here that we cannot get rid of. But I can grab our control, and I can move it around like that. Okay? So now I want to create a rotate plane IK on this. So I'm going to go back in my tool, and I'm going to switch to rotate plane. So I'm going to click my first joint and then my last joint. Okay, so now we have our rotate plane. But the interesting thing now, first of all, again, remember their values. The values aren't quite as crazy on this one, but they're still there. And if I zero them out, bad things happen. See? Okay. So as you notice, I got these different attributes in here. I got a pull vector, which we're going to talk about in a later podcast, but I got a twist, and I can click on twist, and in the perspective view, I can middle mouse click and virtual drag, and you can see I can move my elbow. Okay, so this is the big difference, is that it does have this pull vector system in there, where this system does not have that in. Why not just put a rotate plane on everything? Because IKs can be pretty buggy. And I know I was very picky about how you're laying orientation in your joints down last week. That's because IKs, if they don't have perfect, flat, planar orientations, they love to explode and love to do weird things at different times. Sometimes they just explode right out. Other times they wait at the worst opportune time. So they can be buggy, especially if the math is kind of chaotic, meaning your joints aren't really cleanly positioned and oriented properly. So the last thing you want to do is just kind of force it on people, and hopefully that it's like, oh, it should be fine. And, IKs are one of those things where they like to make your life miserable. So let's do some other observations. If you notice that the rotate plane, the orientation of the control is actually in world orientation, while the single chain one is actually pointing down with the joint chain, which is kind of interesting. That's not really a huge issue, but it's just an interesting observation that it does that. And that's a lot of the reason why we're getting extra rotation values and things like that in there. Okay, so the next step on here would be creating controls on here, but I wanted to talk about one other way of creating IKs. If I delete my IKs, and a lot of times when you get to more complex systems, you'll have IKs that are overlapped, joint chains that are overlapped on top of each other, like with the clavicle and the arm, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to show this again when we get to the clavicle arm, but I wanted to show you in here. So I'll go into my rotate plane, I go to my outliner, I'm going to expand my joint chain, and with my reticle on, I can click my first joint, hold down Command, and select my last joint. And there we go, and I can create it too. I actually really prefer that method onto it, and it helps out a lot. So normally my IKs will be actually named with whatever the orientation, like left, the name of the system, and then an IK at the end to do that. That pretty much is how to create basic IKs.